Hello everyone, welcome back to Relax with Animal Facts. I am Steph Wolf, and today we are going to be talking about our furry, scaly, or possibly even slimy friends. We're going to be doing the Seahorse episode today, so I'm not sure if it exactly falls into one specific category of furry or scaly or slimy, but regardless, we are doing the Seahorse, which is an amazing animal. This episode is going to be dedicated to Kelly, who wrote in suggesting the Seahorse. So Kelly, from wherever you are, you didn't specify. Thank you so much for writing into the show. And those of you that want to hear your animal on the podcast, you can go ahead and send an email to relaxwithanimalfacts@gmail.com, and I will get back to you, and you have a chance of learning about your animal and being shouted out on the podcast at the same time. So those of you who have already written in and continue to write in, thank you so much. I really love reading those. It puts a smile on my face to see all of you guys so passionate. And speaking of passionate, I have started a Patreon page for this podcast. It is patreon.com/RWAF podcast. And I'm going to be posting video episodes of different animals that won't be on the show on Spotify, on iTunes, or anywhere else. So there's going to be an exclusive video episode of the RWAF podcast on certain animals every week on Thursday. So those of you that really, really like this podcast and want to hear it 2 times a week, you can go ahead and go to patreon.com/RWAF podcast and help support the show a little bit. So if you're going to be doing that, I guess I would encourage you to wait until Thursday when the first exclusive video episode is going to be posted. And I'm going to be putting a lot of effort into this. We're talking ambiance or ambience, however you say that word, how fancy you want to be. But it's going to be as relaxing an environment as possible. I absolutely love doing the podcast, and I want to put out some premium content for you guys. So if you want to help support the show, you can go visit the Patreon for the podcast. Or if you want to support the show in a different way, following on Spotify is really, really helpful, or on iTunes or whatever you listen to this podcast on. It really helps support the show. So anyways, enough rambling. Why don't we just get into the show here. So I got my facts from onekindplanet.org and National Geographic. Now, I'm not sure how long of an episode this is going to be necessarily, just because the Seahorse is a very sort of niche animal, very interesting, one of the most complex and cool creatures. I've known a little bit about them before this podcast, before I searched up a bunch of these facts. Just a quick disclaimer for any of you new listeners out there: I am not an animal biologist of any kind. I did study biology a little bit, but we're not talking about the level at which professionals know animals and things like that. I am just a person who's really interested in animals, that enjoys learning, I guess, in the company of you guys. So thanks for joining me. So we're going to just start off with the first fact. So the Seahorse is considered a fish, and it lives from 1 to 5 years in the wild. So those of you who maybe have not seen a Seahorse before, they are fairly small creatures. We're talking about 0.6 to 14 inches. I'm not very good with the conversions to centimeters, so those of you who go in centimeters, you might have to go on a converter there. So generally, smaller creatures will live a little bit shorter of a lifespan. So 1 to 5 years sounds about right here. I'm not sure how they are in captivity. We have seen in previous episodes that captivity really helps raise life expectancy, and whether or not that is necessarily, whether it is a better quality of life is of course debated, but it didn't say any facts about how long they live in captivity, only in the wild, 1 to 5 years. And they are found in shallow and tropical temperate waters kind of throughout the world. And there are actually 40 known species of seahorse, which is incredible. They must be pretty small changes, because I think the look of a seahorse, you would probably be able to identify all 40 species of saying, I could probably point to any of the 40 and say that's a seahorse. But it was there, because there's so many species, it was hard to find the specific differences between them and how they differentiate from each other. I'm just going to take a quick drink of my tea. I have gotten some emails saying that you guys actually do enjoy when I take a little tea break. So those of you listening, you can kind of take a little drink with me here. That is a little bit too hot for my taste. I'm drinking a little bit chamomile tea today in a plastic mug. I don't recommend doing that, but it works for me here. Seahorses prefer to swim in pairs with their tails linked together. So they have this sort of way of maneuvering around. Whether this is some sort of adaptive thing, I'm going to assume so, but I assume that it would be so they can travel easier together. As we've seen, they are fairly small and can be greatly influenced by the water. So if they're in a stormy kind of situation, having their tails linked together can really help navigate themselves and make sure that they don't get all lost in between. So they swim upright to avoid predators by mimicking the color of underwater plants. So we see this kind of mimicry here happening. So mimicry is something that is very, very useful. We have seen previously animals that use mimicry for predatory reasons, and how some of them use it for particularly survival as prey. So this is mimicry is seen in butterflies, in octopus, and we can see that it's visible here in seahorses. And I absolutely love that these animals have these instincts to be able to immediately, mimic the color of something to avoid possible detection. So I just think that's amazing. Except for crabs, few marine predators eat the seahorse. This is because it is too bony and indigestible. So sometimes predators have to really gauge whether something is worth the risk for the reward. I mean, in this case, there's not too much risk of going for a seahorse other than expending the energy to be able to catch the seahorse specifically. And when we're talking about an environment where energy really is a precious resource, where they don't have all-inclusive resorts and stuff like that, where energy expenditure could really mean a life or death scenario. So when there is no big reward for a possible large risk of an expenditure of energy, I guess in this case, like the seahorse, they won't be preyed on as much. I suppose crabs are less picky. That's actually, it seems like kind of a pun there, not intentional. But crabs seem to enjoy eating the seahorse regardless if it's bony and indigestible. Maybe because crabs themselves are bony, but I guess, for me, I don't eat crab. I don't like crab too much. I know a lot of people like it, but to me, it is also bony and indigestible. Seahorses propel themselves by using a small fin on their back that flutters up to 35 times per second. So if we can put that into some perspective, 35 times per second in water resistance, that is very fast. Even smaller pectoral fins located near the back of the head are used for steering. So I just think that's awesome that these guys are like little kayaks almost. They're able to navigate using two different pairs of fins to propel and to steer themselves where they need to go. And because of their body shape, that is particularly the reason why they are not such good swimmers. They are actually fairly inept swimmers. And this can easily cause exhaustion when they're trying to really move through stormy seas, as we said before. So maybe this is why they link their tails together. I'm trying to maybe connect A to B here. That might not necessarily be the relation, but that's what I'm kind of picking up on here. So seahorses, although they have sea in their name, they're not the best swimmers. So they anchor themselves with their prehensile tails to seagrasses and corals. So prehensile, that is a word that is used usually with creatures like primates, because prehensile refers to the ability to grasp. So we're talking about their tails grasping to seagrasses and corals. So prehensile, you guys can remember that. So they will use their elongated snouts to be able to kind of suck in plankton and small crustaceans that happen to drift by. So they're not necessarily that predatory, but they are indeed carnivores. So the seahorse can suck up food into its mouth from as far as 3 centimeters away. And if we're talking about 0.6 inches being the smallest size, 3 centimeters away, it's all relative. That's a decent, I guess, amount of power to be able to suck in plankton from 3 feet away. And the seahorse will feed constantly on plankton and on tiny fish. It moves each of its eyes independently, which is really cool, and it will follow the activity of passing sea life without giving its presence away. I don't know if that's mostly a fish thing, where they're able to move their eyes independently. I've seen a lot of fish do this, at least when I've watched documentaries and things like that. I don't see it happening that often with creatures out of the water. I know that there may be some people out there that can move one eye or the other, and I'm not sure how that works exactly. But I just think it's very cool that they can move each eye independently, and this allows them not to have to turn every so often and give away their position. So might quite possibly be an adaptive trait. So one cool thing is that food passes through the digestive system so quickly that they must eat almost constantly to stay alive. And this is because they have no teeth and no stomach. So this is, of course, the reason why they have to eat pretty much constantly. So no stomach means I guess a few different things. They can't store food necessarily to be digested over time. I suppose their metabolism is fairly high, or I'm not sure how their digestive systems exactly work without a stomach. I guess this would, if you guys are super interested, you could always dig deeper into these animals and learn some more. I just think that it's so cool that they have no teeth and no stomach, but they are alive and well. So they can consume 3,000 or more brine shrimp per day. So 3,000 shrimp per day. They're having like an all-you-can-eat buffet constantly, which is awesome for them. Good for the seahorse. And this is something that is very cool for me. Seahorses are monogamous, and they will mate for life. Monogamy is something that is not very popular in the animal kingdom. Polygamy most oftentimes is the way to go for animals. There's a few reasons for this. It could be for expanding the diversity of genes and things like that, to make sure that offspring can possibly better survive. Polygamy can really provide a sense of genetic diversity that I guess is not that equal to monogamy. But I'm sure there are many other reasons for polygamy. These are going the things I've learned on the podcast so far and whatnot. And keep in mind, those of you who actually are biologists or maybe are more versed with in the, I guess, animal world, you can always correct me if I say something wrong. I will correct it on the next episode. I will start a segment specifically dedicated to my mistakes, because we all make mistakes. I'm just here learning with you guys. So if I say something you feel is inaccurate or could be said better, you don't be afraid to write into the show. So seahorses are monogamous and mate for life. This is also something that is seen in many birds, actually. Birds are really interesting in that if they find their partner cheating, they will leave the nest, which is, I think, so cool that an animal has this kind of approach to reproduction. And this is the primary fact that really, I guess, shocks me and makes this species so interesting, is that the male bears the unborn young. So the male is the one that bears the young, which is basically unheard of in the animal kingdom. I have never heard of this before the seahorse. I'm not sure why nature has selected it to be this way, but it is. And the male pregnancy will free females to be able to make more eggs straight away so they can reproduce even quicker. And before this happens, seahorses will engage in an 8-hour courtship dance, which includes They will spin around, they will change colors, they will swim side by side. Those of you who maybe like to watch animal documentaries, there are so many on Netflix that feature birds doing really interesting mating dances. If you haven't seen it before, there's some really, really funny dances that birds do. But enough about birds. We're talking about the seahorse and its 8-hour courtship dance. I love these courtship dances. I am going to search one up on YouTube after this podcast and see exactly what it's all about. But I just love that they have to court each other in these very complex ways. I just think it's amazing. So when mating, the female seahorse releases up to 50 eggs into a pouch on the male's abdomen. So we see that the male's abdomen is like the pouch is like their nest, kind of, which is pretty interesting. We have covered marsupials before on the show that have pouches, but the seahorse is, of course, not considered a marsupial. Although a pouch is one of its distinguishing characteristics, I wonder where that falls, or if it's kind of like a gray area. I think that's pretty cool. So the male seahorse will carry the eggs in his pouch until they hatch, and then releases fully formed miniature seahorses into the water. And it'll be as little as 5 or as many as 1,500 young can be born per time. So we covered not seahorses. We covered other animals before that prefer to have one young. We just did the tiger, which sometimes will have 2 to 3. But now we're talking as little as 5 to up to 1,500 children. I'm sure there is a different kind of maturation process there, because I'm not sure what kind of, if the young actually watch the adults suck in plankton or things like that, or if it's just something that they're born instinctively to do. So that is something that I would also like to research more into, because we've covered animals. For example, the orangutan very, very much relies on its parent for the first 6 to 8 years of its life. It is completely helpless because it learns from its mother how to hunt things, how to forage, how to do different things, build nests, and I suppose that the seahorse maybe doesn't have this problem. It would be a little bit difficult to have 1 or 2 seahorses in charge of up to 1,500 young in a little seahorse daycare. So I'm sure that they are born with a lot of these instincts and don't have to be raised quite the same way as maybe orangutans or tiger cubs or bear cubs need to be raised. So one more quick sip of my tea here. So that was the last fact for the seahorse, and we are going to move on to the name Seahorse. So those of you that are new to the podcast, I always like to go into the name, where it originates from, maybe a story of how it was discovered. In the case of the seahorse, the Latin name for seahorse is hippocampus, which means horse caterpillar, deriving from Latin. So I just think that's pretty cool. Horse caterpillar, and I can absolutely see where those words fit into that creature. If you haven't seen a seahorse before, I encourage you to Google it, or maybe even watch a courtship dance, because I know that I'm going to. So thank you all so very much for tuning into the show. I appreciate all of your support. If you would like to see your animal, or hear your animal rather, on the podcast, go ahead and send an email to relaxwithanimalfacts@gmail.com, and we can have a back and forth, and maybe you'll be shouted out on the podcast with an animal of your choice. So again, Patreon launches this Thursday with an exclusive video episode. So you're going to get 2 episodes per week, one on the normal podcast on Mondays and one on Thursday morning as well, which is going to be a video podcast. So thank you all so very much for tuning into the show, and I will see you on the next episode with the next animal. Take care.